Ragi karmapala prepsuhu lubdo himsatmako shuchihi harsha shokanvitah karta rajasaha parikirtitaha. Who is a Rajasika Karta? Krishna, after explaining the characteristics of a Sattvika Karta, now takes up the second category of Kartas, the Rajasika Karta. A Rajasika Karta is one who is disconnected from the ultimate Karta. That is the bottom line. While a Sattvika Karta, a Sattvika doer, is one who is ever connected with the ultimate doer. When the Rajoguna dominates, one gets disconnected from Bhagavan. And therefore, when one is disconnected from the ultimate doer, the individual doer, the agent of the action, begins to believe that the karma done by the karta is the definitive cause of the karma phala, while in reality, it is only a contributive cause. A Rajasika karta believes that his karma becomes a definitive cause of the karma phala. The Rajas ensures that the karta remains always in a state of imbalance. The mind is constantly oscillating, wavering, in a state of agitation, is ever unsettled all the time. And the doer has a misplaced identity. There is a misconception of his own true identity. Therefore, while Krishna begins with the first characteristic of Mokṣha Sanyāsa for a Sattvika Karta, here Krishna begins with the first characteristic for a Rajasika Karta, the first characteristic being he is a Ragi. Ragi karma phala prepsyuhu. Ragi. A Rajasika Karta is a Ragi, one who is attached. Raga is attachment. Interestingly, when we say Raga, Dvesha also is embedded in Raga. Raga and Dvesha are two sides of the same coin. Attachment and aversion, attraction and repulsion, love and hatred, like and dislike. They are two sides of the same coin. The very swarupa of Ajnana is Raga and Dvesha. It is Raga and Dvesha which are the fundamental causes for our bondage. Samsara is a result of Raga and Dvesha. In a way, aversion is also a form of attachment. It is just negative attachment. Therefore, aversion and attachment impact the mind in a similar manner. Hidden within Raga are also Bhaya and Krodha. So therefore, when one is controlled by Raga, one is also controlled by one's Bhaya and Krodha. That is why Krishna calls Raga and Dvesha as stumbling blocks and as thieves, as decoys. Indriyasyendriyasyate ragadvesho vyavastithau. Tayorna vasamagachet tauhyasya paripanthinau, he says. Tauhyasya paripanthinau. Raga and dvesha are not only stumbling blocks on the road of progress, they are also like dacoits which steal our peace. And a Rajasic Karta is one who is unable to regulate his Raga and Dvesha. If Raga and Dvesha are not regulated, then they take charge. Then they start to control. Raga and Dvesha both do not belong to us. They pertain to the senses and sense objects. It is by design that the senses and sense objects either attract or repel. That's the nature of the design. The senses either attract sense objects or repel. Attraction and repulsion pertain to Prakriti. They do not belong to the Atman. But if the Atman, which is indwelling in the body, if it does not take charge and regulate Raga and Dvesha, then it gets controlled. It gets controlled by Raga and Dvesha. And both Raga and Dvesha, our attachment and aversion, both of them have the same kind of impact on the mind. And what is the impact? Perennial distraction. The mind is always in a state of distraction. When we are attached to someone or something, we are emotionally invested in that someone or something. When we are emotionally invested in someone or something, then we are emotionally unavailable for Krishna. Similarly, this emotional unavailability for Krishna also happens when we have aversion for someone or something. When we have aversion for someone or something, we are also emotionally consumed. And when we are emotionally consumed by someone or something, even in that state, we are not emotionally available for Krishna. Which essentially means Raga or Dvesha will ensure that we are distracted all the time from Krishna. The mind is always in a state of distraction. Therefore, a Rajasic Karta, whenever he or she engages in a karma, is always emotionally consumed, emotionally invested in things which are external, and therefore in that process, he or she cannot be connected with Krishna in the process of doing the action. And hence, such an action which is performed in a state of the doer being disconnected from the ultimate doer, any such action will always be unproductive. That is the reason why any Rajasic action is never productive. Ragi karma phala prepsyuhu. Karma phala prepsyuhu. Krishna, the second characteristic of a Rajasic Karta, Krishna says, Rajasic Karta is one who is karma phala prepsyuhu, he says. He is not only attached to karma phala, he not only has expectations of karma phala, he covets the results of action. To covet means to crave for something which does not belong to one, which belongs to somebody else. So this needs to be very clearly understood. A Rajasic Karta covets the results of his or her action, which means the results of our action in reality do not belong to us. We do not have ownership over the results of our own action, because there are several other contributive factors, and ultimately the owner of any action is Bhagavan himself. By claiming ownership over the result of our action, we are trying to steal, we are trying to covet something which does not belong to us. That is why Krishna says a rajasic karta is karma phala prepsyuhu, he says. Trying to claim something which does not belong to us. Ragi karma phala prepsyuhu lubdaha. Lubdaha himsatmakaha ashuchihi. Lubdaha. Lubdha. Rajasic karta is greedy. Now, our Shastras talk about the four ultimate aims of life: Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. So, Artha has a significant place in our life and living, no doubt. Artha stands for everything which is needed for our material well-being, for our material welfare, for our bodily welfare. We do have material needs, no doubt. Even in our spiritual journey, we need to take care of our bodily needs. So therefore, Artha has a significant place. But Artha always has to be complemented with Dharma. And what is Dharma? Dharma is the law that harmonizes all aspects of life and living. Dharma is the law that ensures that there is harmony between the part and the whole to which it belongs. Artha, when it is divested of Dharma, becomes Anartha. Greed is Artha without Dharma. Greed is when our needs become our wants and our wants become our cravings. For a Rajasic Karta, the goalpost keeps constantly changing because of greed. So we all think that when we try to fulfill a desire, the goalpost is the object of the desire. This is our normal thinking. We all assume that in the process of fulfilling our desire, the goalpost happens to be the object of the desire. If my desire is to buy a luxury car, then the goalpost is that luxury car. So when I end up buying that luxury car, I have reached that goalpost. But whether we realize it or not, when we analyze it deeply, the goalpost is not actually the object of the desire. The goalpost is the satisfaction that we get when we acquire that object of the desire. It is not the object of the desire, but the satisfaction that we get when we acquire, when we possess that object of the desire. Now, we may get some satisfaction when we eventually acquire or possess the object of desire, but our greed undercuts that satisfaction by riveting our focus to another object of desire, something that we do not possess. And that is the reason why every time we acquire or possess an object of our desire, the goalpost keeps changing constantly all the time. Because the greed ensures that the goalpost goes beyond the object of the desire The goalpost goes beyond the satisfaction that one gets when one acquires object of the desire. And eventually, the goalpost becomes the desire itself. So which means every time we fulfill the desire will only consume us, torment us, because ultimately the goalpost is never reached. Greed, therefore, ensures that one is constantly tormented all the time. One is always in a state of craving, wanting more, more and more. So therefore, the key driver for a Rajasic Karta is Lubdha, is greed. Wanting more and more, not knowing what is the ultimate goalpost, because chasing an illusion. For a Rajasic Karta, every goalpost becomes an illusion. Why? Because the illusion being that what we don't have is what becomes the source of our happiness. That is the illusion. Our source of happiness always becomes what we do not have. Lubdaha, one who is greedy. Rajasic Karta is therefore one who is constantly chasing something, always in a state of mental scarcity. One cannot experience abundance, which is the very design of creation, when one is greedy, because a Rajasic Karta is always looking at things that one does not have, and everything is scarce. Lubdo himsatmako shuchihi. Himsatmaka. Himsatmaka can be understood in two ways. Himsatmaka, one who is envious. Himsatmaka, one who is violent nature. Himsatmaka, a Rajasic Karta is envious. One of the drivers for the action of a Rajasic Karta is envy. Envy, no doubt, targets the envied, but it torments the envious. How do we learn this? We learn this from Mahabharata. And the greatest example for this is Duryodhana, who is the very embodiment of envy. Duryodhana always was envious of the Pandavas. His envy targeted the envy of the Pandavas, but tormented the envious Duryodhana all the time. No wonder, even after the Pandavas were exiled, when the Pandavas were thrown out of their kingdom, Pandavas were very happy in their Vanavasa. But it was Duryodhana who lost his peace all the time. It is his envy which tormented him all the time. Pandavas were very blissful throughout the Vanavasa. But Duryodhana was relentlessly dissatisfied. His envy burnt him every day, day in and day out. He was sleepless all the time. There was no peace. He could have lived life luxuriously in the palace of Hastinapura. But his envy ensured that he lacked peace. Now, how do we decrease envy? How do we ensure that one avoids becoming envious? Because envy sometimes becomes very natural, because when Rajas dominates, we see only differences. And when we see differences all around, we start to look at gradations. Superior, inferior, good, bad, all kinds of labeling happens. And when we look at people around with unique endowments, with unique talents, with unique skills, envy becomes very natural. And what we can learn from Mahabharata is how Pandavas were not envious and why Kauravas were always envious, whereas Pandavas were never envious. The difference was the realization that any excellence, any opulence is nothing but a spark, a manifestation of the spark of supreme excellence of Krishna. When this realization happens, when we look at anything that is excellent, anything that is glorious, instead of being reminded of our inferiority, we would only celebrate the glory of Krishna. There will be no room for envy at all. This is how Pandavas could remain away from envy all the time, whereas Kauravas were tormented with envy. A Rajasic Karta is disconnected from Krishna and cannot recognize Krishna's vibhutis, and therefore is always driven by envy. Hinsatmakaha is also a Rajasic Karta, is violent in nature. What kind of violence is this? This is what the modern world talks about: survival of the fittest. This is highly Rajasic in nature. Survival of the fittest is nothing but Rajas in action. Our Shastras talk about sacrifice by the fittest, not survival of the fittest. Whereas, the modern world, we are taught to look at growing by surviving, by harming others, winning over others, by suppressing others. This is Rajas in action. Why? Because human beings are given the unique endowment of intelligence for only one purpose. The intelligence is given to pursue a higher purpose, to seek the nature of reality, to realize one's true nature, to realize one's purpose of life. But when that intelligence is used for the sake of bodily gratification and to do activities centered around bodily gratification, activities which every other living being does, if the supreme intelligence that is given is used for the sake of performing bodily activities that are centered around bodily gratification, then one realizes that after all, there are only limited material resources. And these limited material resources can only give limited pleasures. And this scarcity drives greed, this scarcity drives craving, this scarcity drives violence. Violence in all forms. Survival of the fittest becomes the norm. Every action becomes Rajasic in nature. A Rajasic Karta, therefore, is, Krishna says, is Himsatmakaha. Himsatmakaha. He is always wanting. For him, winning comes only at the cost of somebody losing. That becomes the conception of life. Himsatmakaha ashuchihi. Ashuchihi. Shuchihi ashuchihi. A Rajasic Karta is one who has no impurity sensors. No impurity sensors. There is no censoring mechanism. No, the sensor here is SENSOR. And because he lacks impurity sensors, no amount of censoring CENSOR will work. When there is no impurity sensor, every time when a stimuli is presented to a Rajasic Karta, the question that is asked is, will this give me pleasure or not? The pleasurability of the stimuli becomes the only question that is considered all the time. Also, the mental gravity of a Rajasic Karta is in such a way that all the thoughts gravitate towards the world. Just like, when a stone is thrown, the stone has to gravitate back towards the earth because there is the force of gravity which pulls the stone towards the earth. The world has a pull. Worldliness has a pull. So all the thoughts of a Rajasic Karta by design gravitate towards. Now, in contrast, for a Sattvika Karta, we see that this mental gravity is reversed. The gravitational pull is towards Krishna. And if the gravitational pull of Krishna is lacking, then the thoughts by default only gravitate towards the world and worldly objects. So therefore, a Rajasic Karta is one who, because of the impurities of Rajas, remains poor all the time. Poverty is natural. Even a wealthy Rajasic Karta has to be poor, because a millionaire will be poor if he is fixated on a billionaire. If the fixation of a millionaire is on a billionaire, then even the millionaire will feel poor. So a Rajasic Karta is always in a state of poverty, a state of mental poverty all the time. Ashuchi, Ashaucha causes mental poverty. Himsatmakaha ashuchihi harsha shokanvita karta. Harsha shokanvita karta. One who is subject to pleasures and pains. One who is swayed, moved. A Rajasic Karta constantly is oscillating. Pains and pleasures move the Karta all the time. When one is moved all the time by pains and pleasures, then one cannot stay focused on that which is beyond the pains and pleasures, because pains and pleasures are at the level of the body. For a Rajasic Karta, the Rajasic Karta cannot balance between one's true identity, which is eternal, and with one's current identity, which is only functional. The functional identity of body takes over prominence, and one is at the level of catering to bodily needs, bodily wants, bodily cravings, and the mind is so much preoccupied at that level that one cannot transcend beyond one's functional identity, which is at the level of the body, to even contemplate on something beyond. It is very important to take care of the body, but the Shastras say the art of living is to continue to cater to the needs of the body, and in the process also progress on the path of realizing the soul. Catering to the needs of the body, but in the process one needs to also progress on the path of realizing the soul. But if one remains only at the level of catering to the needs of the body, which a Rajasic Karta is preoccupied with, then there is no further progress. So harsha shokanvitaha. So every time there is pain and pleasure, it completely distracts the karta. The karta is so very emotionally consumed and emotionally drained. And therefore, the energy that the karta can bring to the karma is so very minimal. There is only so much energy that is available to us that can be put to use for an action to be performed. When a bulk of that energy is consumed for things other than the karma itself, then every karma performed is not going to be optimal. Therefore, a Rajasic karta seems to be constantly acting, constantly doing work, but the output is completely, is in no way, is the output compared to the input seems to have no connection whatsoever. There is output is suboptimal all the time, and that is the reason why the work of Rajasic karta is unproductive. So Krishna, now having explained Sattvika karta and Rajasic karta, will finally take up the nature of the Tamasic karta before he will move on to analyze Dhriti and Buddhi based on the three modes of the three gunas. Until then, let us contemplate on how to avoid being a Rajasic karta. How to avoid being a Rajasic karta? The this cause for this illness of Rajas is Raga. Raga, which means automatically Dvesha also has to be included. Raga and Dvesha, and the more attention we give on our Raga and Dvesha, the more awareness that we have on our attractions and aversions, attractions and repulsions, likes and dislikes. In that awareness, we see how we can rise above our Raga and Dvesha and become Mukta Sangaha. Because as long as we are Ragi, we will remain a Rajasic karta. A Ragi has to transform to become a Mukta Sangaha, who is a Sattvika karta. So let us contemplate on how to transform ourselves from being a Ragi to a Mukta Sangaha. Then we will take up the nature of a Tamasic karta in the next session. Sarvam Sri Krishna.